I would have loved to have known what originally came in this box, because it's a fairly good sized box. And more importantly, notice what it says right there. CEJ. Whatever was in here was a product of, I think it's Carl E. Johansson. I believe he was Swedish, and I believe he was the guy who invented Joe blocks. There's a whole great history there between this gentleman and Henry Ford and the making of some sort of standard measurement block. And to this day, these CEJ or Johansson blocks, or Joe blocks as they're called, they're still considered really good standards. Anyways, unfortunately, all this is a CEJ box, and it was used to house this little surface gauge and this poor rode hard and put up wet Starrett last word, which, true to the Starrett name, is still actually working fine. That'll be a cheap indicator for somebody. See if we can find any identification on this little sucker. Oh, winner, winner, chicken dinner. That is a Starrett number 56, clearly marked. Oh, that's a honey for the money. I think I got this for $5. I'm sure this little plastic thumb wheel right here is not original to this. Yeah, that's nice. All right, I found a cardboard box filled with used circuit breakers, and went through the whole box and found two Square D QO style breakers. There was actually a third one, but it was broken. So my panels, my electrical panels here in the house, all use Square D QO breakers, and I want to install another sub panel, add more power out and more outlets here in the shop. So I've been collecting these as I find them. But anyways, so save a couple bucks there. Pair of 1, 2, 3 blocks, pretty nice. They got a good grind on them. These have some threaded holes. These look like these are production, that they're not in shop type of, you know. All right, this is an interesting little thing. This is a center punch device designed for finding the center on the end of a piece of round stock. So, you know, if you had a piece of round stock like that and I wanted to put a punch mark right in the center there, this would be a self-aligning deal because of the bell shape. Mr. Pete, I believe, featured one of these on one of his What Is It episodes. That's the deal there. So the idea being is that if I put this up in there like that, and I hold this as level as possible, and I strike this, I should get a pretty accurate center punch mark, relatively speaking. Have a fishtail and a little Mitutoyo pouch, 950-201, and that's actually what that is. It is actually a 950-201 Mitutoyo fishtail. Got another fishtail in here somewhere, a loose one. Here it is. And there's a Starrett. A Rogue micrometer. The Central Tool Company of Cranston, Rhode Island, USA. Lock works good. Just a regular thousandths micrometer. If this is supposed to be a ratchet, it doesn't ratchet anymore. And it does not have carbide tips. So that's going to be a dirt cheap 0 to 1 micrometer for somebody. Here's another little indicator tool holder. Okay, got the dovetail holding clamp on one end, and it's got the little flexible arms. And then this would just be able to be chucked directly into a collet, or alternatively, it has a threaded hole on the inside there. Now, interestingly enough, this is actually marked Federal on here. So, and here's one of these friction fit Starrett. Oftentimes, these are packaged with the last word indicators. When I was walking around, I spotted one of these handles, and at first, I just left it. And then when I was getting everything so cheap and piling stuff together and making piles and getting such really good deals on everything, and I found the second handle in another location, I went back and grabbed the first one and put them together and said, I'll take those. Because, I mean, why wouldn't you? These are actually pretty nice handles. Handles get broken. And, you know, if you go online, you go to buy a handle like this, you could pay a pretty decent amount, depending on what machine it may have gone on. It has markings on it. I take that back. I actually thought, without my glasses on, I thought that this was some sort of indication of a maker's name or something. And what it is it's a whole series of double pock marks, almost as if like from years of this whacking something every time it was turned. It's kind of weird. See it? 2 rows of them. And they don't exist on this one. Go figure. Hey guys, I just had to jump back to this prior made in Sheffield, England punch set because I couldn't believe it, but they actually still manufacture this set. You can buy it on Amazon right now, and it's $470 for this set new. A couple of them have sold on eBay used, but they were in England. So they were probably sold in England to people in England. So, you know, if I was over in England and was selling this thing, it'd be worth quite a bit more. Oddly enough, I can't seem to find anybody selling just individual, the 2 missing letters that I have missing out of this set. I did find some guys in England that are selling like lots of letters, like 200 or 400 of them, just random. So I certainly don't want to pay for all of those. But I don't know, I just thought that you might find it interesting if you weren't aware. If you ever happen to come across one of these at a swap meet, boy, I'll tell you. I bet you can get it pretty cheap, a lot cheaper than what it's worth. Here's a Craftsman drill gauge. This is a model 4047. This is for number-sized drills. Number-sized drill gauge, machine screw tap and wire gauge. Been heavily cleaned by the looks of it. As long as we're on drill gauges, there's another one here. This is a Mitutoyo, a 950-206 fractional size drill gauge. And I think that stain is on the plastic and not the gauge. Yeah. So that's nice because that's a satin chrome finish one. It's a little dirty, but should clean up fine. This is a scribe with a carbide tip from a height gauge. And I just found this laying around. I did end up getting a height gauge out of this this haul, but I don't know if this even belonged to that height gauge or not. Here's a nice spanner wrench. This is a Blue Point branded spanner wrench, now 6-1 and 8-1. Indicator attachment 711EA. Yep, that's what that is. Oh, that's going to come in handy to somebody. I think I've had recently some Stare at Last words. I think one of them might have been missing this piece. So that's a good piece, and that's brand new. Still a sealed bag. This is a wire gauge set, or the thread wires, thread measuring wires. This is for using the 3-wire method for measuring threads, in which you would actually put 2 wires on the top of the threads, 1 wire on the bottom, and then the micrometer over that whole mess. Takes a study hand, but it's definitely doable, and it's a lot cheaper than a thread micrometer with all those fancy anvils. I already have one of these, so I'll probably sell this one to somebody. Made in Japan, so decent quality. Here's a 4-piece telescope gauge set, Craftsman 40203. That's a nice little set there. Very clean. Oh, here's another nice little Stare at Last word attachment. This is interesting to me. I got this really cheap because we're just laying in the box, but I have a feeling this is part of a very expensive set that most of the pieces are missing. This is a Stare at number 260. Appears to be, I think this might be a groove micrometer. I think this might be for measuring the distance of a groove from the edge of something very precisely. I'm about to find out. Yep, the 260Z groove micrometer, and right over here it shows how to use it. So you can measure the width of the groove in a bore, or the distance from the edge of an opening to a groove. So that's a handy little tool there. I imagine what Stare It gets for that sucker these days. Yeah, so that sucker's like over $350 new at a discount seller, and then cheapest one I saw sell used was like 80 something bucks on eBay. That's a really nice find right there. Well, I had no idea what that was worth when I spotted it. I had a feeling it would be interesting piece. And I just, looks like I just missed on eBay. Somebody sold an empty box for one of these. I would have liked to have gotten that. I'll keep my eye out for a box for this thing. And here's an early Starrett protractor head. That's a Starrett number 12. And the vial's not broken, it's intact. And it's complete. Quite a bit of wear on it. But it's been quite, it's been around for quite a while. Couldn't find any other pieces or blade for it. Didn't see any point in leaving it there. And then this thing really, I took a quick look at it and I thought it was really cool. And I figured the guy didn't place much value on it because it's just, a stamped steel looking thing. But what this is from the Mass Tool Company of Greenfield, Massachusetts. And I think when I looked this up before, this company, and looked into it, I think that a lot of the designs that this company came up with ended up being acquired by Starrett and then manufactured later by Starrett. The stuff that was, I guess, proved to be worthy of production. So I don't see any part numbers on here to identify exactly, what this particular tool is, but it clearly is some sort of a protractor for measuring angles. And it appears to have a very small vernier up here so that you can get more precise angle measurements by using the vernier in the same manner that you would use a vernier on a caliper. So I would say that, these are degrees, so probably on the vernier here are going to be minutes. But I've never seen one this early. From the Mass Tool Company. That's probably going to be a good collectible for somebody. Alright, so I don't really have time to look it all up and discuss the history of the company, but the Mass Tool Company was, I believe, a wholly owned subsidiary of Goodell Pratt, or the originator of Goodell Pratt, Mr. Pratt, started the Mass Tool Company in Greenfield, Massachusetts earlier, I believe. Anyways, so when I searched for a Goodell Pratt protractor, I ended up finding a drafting protractor, and that led me to a Google Books reprint of an early Popular Mechanics magazine with this advertisement: Goodell Pratt, 1500 good tools, Draftsman's protractor number 50. And that sure as heck looks exactly like what I've got here. So it's a Draftsman's protractor, which is interesting because the gentleman who I bought this stuff from, he had a couple of drafting sets there, in the cases, which in the past I've always passed on those. So I didn't even end up making an offer on them, but he said they had belonged to his grandfather. I'm now wondering whether or not this was also part of that drafting equipment that his grandfather once owned. Boy, the stories this could probably tell. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, yeah, this is actually a pretty nice brown and sharp micrometer. It's got the friction thimble. Brown and sharp, Kingston, Rhode Island. This thing looks brand new. It's a 1 to 2 inch carbide faces. It's a tenths micrometer. Lock works. Friction thimble works. Got the original paperwork in here. I don't think this thing's seen much use at all. Straight line micrometer, convertible thimble, spindle lock, carbide faces. 599-20-13. That's a nice mic. Shars. This is actually a empty Shars box that I found after I had already bought. I bought a whole bunch of magnetic indicator stands, and many of them had indicators that still attached to them. And I think one of the ones I bought looked like a cheap Chinese one, and then I found this Shars box, so I decided, well, might as well take that so I could put the indicator in it to ship the indicator if I sell it. So we should see that later on. This is going to be a multi-part, obviously, probably already on part 2. And here's a Federal indicator box with an early Federal indicator inside. And this has the back with it. The back is off. I forgot the story here why this was apart. I think this had another back on it originally. He had a modified back on here, I think. And that was on another stand that I didn't end up buying, I don't think. So, anyways, so then we found... So I was going to buy this indicator just the way it was, the back missing. And then later we found this box, and lo and behold, in the box was the back. So then I decided to just put this back in here with it. And it's just some random screws and hardware in here. But this is actually perfectly fine working indicator. This is kind of something I've never seen before. Somebody has put a label on here, 2098D. Now I'm going to show you something very interesting that I got from this haul a little later on, and it's supposed to have an indicator on it, and this might be the indicator that was on there, and that might be why that's on there. And we'll talk about that when I get to that. I think you guys are going to find that interesting. At least I did. Hey guys, here's a surface gauge that I found. There was a granite surface plate sitting there. I just actually got rid of the granite surface plate that I had because I don't really have room for multiple surface plates, and I've got my cast iron one that I actually like the size of. So anyways, but this was sitting there, and I got a really good deal on this because it's not a brown and a sharp, it's not a brown and sharp or Starrett or anything like that. This is actually marked CSE, made in Germany. So I think it's pretty interesting. I did find like a couple of large vernier calipers that have sold in the past on eBay that were by this company. I wasn't able to track down exactly the name of the manufacturer, what CSE stands for. I think these are probably, well, for starters, old height gauges like this, you know, unless they're in pristine condition in the original cases, they don't tend to bring much money. And then the fact that, again, it's a you know, it's not a known brand, doesn't have a whole lot of value to it. It's actually it's 22 inch. Technically, it's funny, the graduations go up to 22.5 inch, but I always get a kick out of the fact that, just like with dial calipers, you know, you can buy a set of 6-inch dial calipers, but they're only usable up to a certain point because you run out of travel room. So, I mean, if I want to use the 0 mark on the vernier here, but anyways, I can only go up so far before I run out of room where the fine adjust will then become off the rack, so off the track completely. And then it's got what looks to be the original clamp, and it's got a carbide tipped scriber on it, which is nice. I think that's carbide tipped. Yeah, you know what? That might not be. That might be just a steel, tool steel. So, anyways, we'll get a close up of the condition of this thing. So I have no idea on the age, but I mean, it looks like it's been hanging around for quite a while. It's still a good usable. It's going to be a good usable cheap height gauge for somebody. You know, as far as the condition of the bottom, it's kind of typical for one that's been around as long as this has been. And there's a look at that logo, the Made in Germany. So hopefully I'll be able to find that thing a good home. All right, let's move on. All right, let's see what we've got in this next box. Oh, yeah. This is another thing I found near the end when I thought I had bought everything I wanted to buy. And again, found the pallet with a bunch of trash and other stuff that was getting ready to be thrown out. And there was a rack next to it. And on the rack, I happened to spot this box. Armstrong Quality Tools. And what's in here? I think they're brand new. Brand new Armstrong spanner wrenches. Looks like this particular box says 5 spanner wrenches, 2 3/4 center to center. which would be these. So there's 3 left of that size in here, but also there are what appear to be 6 Armstrong 1.5 center to center spanner wrenches. So that's a really good find right there. So I'll check and see what sizes I have, and I'll keep one of each of these if I don't have these sizes already, and I'll be able to offer the rest of these to somebody who might need some of these sizes. These are handy for working on old equipment that uses bearing retainers and that have the holes that these pins engage. Got another surface gauge here. It's got an interesting offset scribing leg. I didn't pay much at all for this surface gauge. I don't think I found any markings on it. So I didn't find any markings on it when I was there, but I spotted this interesting clamping nut, this style clamping nut, and I recognized it as what I thought at the time was definitely a Starrett clamping nut. And these nuts alone, actually, they go for a few bucks. So I figured it was worth snagging it. Turns out, right up here on the post, where oftentimes the Starretts are marked, this one is marked that it's a Miller's Falls. So the rod is a Miller's Falls. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if this whole thing, this whole setup isn't Miller's Falls, except for this clamping nut that I thought was Starrett is actually clearly marked General. It's a General number 397 clamping nut. So that's kind of a surprise that I didn't expect. But anyways, get another look at that. It's kind of a neat one. Next up, got another mag base. It's got a little bit of swarf sticking to it. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure who makes this one, but it's got an interesting design in the fact that it's got this press to release button. And what all this press to release button does is it creates a camming action to pop this off of the surface that it's sticking to. It also has a ball, so it gives it a lot of swivel, and it's got a fine adjustment, which is nice. These clamps right here look severely out of place for this, so I don't think these belong. I don't think these are original to the setup here. Be a cheap mag base for somebody. He had a whole box of these type of insert type lathe tooling, and a lot of them were really old ones, and I've kind of gone through that. I've gone through that dance before, and I'm quite sick of collecting those things and not being able to figure out what the hell to use for inserts. So these two I did decide to take because they were clearly marked that they were, Kennametal, which is a good brand name, and usually you can take like the part number off of these and deduce from that what exactly the type of insert this requires. They were also complete. They have the little hold down. They have the little like riser block or whatever you want to call it underneath there that the insert sits on. Although this one's missing something. This looks like it might have been for a grooving or threading insert. This is an NRR-163C. Lots of times these are old and obsolete and you can't find any information on them. Oh, well, I looked this one up online and found one on eBay and looked at a picture, and I noticed on the one that was for sale on eBay, next to this part number for the holder, it was marked insert NU3. So that's how I was able to determine that this is supposed to have an NU3 grooving insert. And there's a metal cap piece that goes on top of this underneath this screw that would clamp that NU3 insert in there. I don't think that has to be too special, though. That'd be something probably easy enough for me to make if I really wanted to use this. Who knows, with all the inserts I have laying around here, I might even have some NU3 inserts. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this, though, before I put it away. Next up, I got some V-blocks. He didn't have a lot of V-blocks there, but what he did have for V-blocks I did grab. This pair of V-blocks had no clamps. And I don't remember if these had any markings on them. Yeah, these are actually marked. So this one's got no markings on it, and this one is marked that it's a Starrett 278, which is interesting because this looks almost like a perfect match for this, but it's not quite. You can actually see that groove on the right hand one is wider. So this is a Starrett 278, and this is a no name. And these do appear to be a pair, same brand, with good fitting clamps, and these are marked India on the end, so these are just a cheap import. They're both marked India. Hey, I was just looking through my other V-blocks that I have, and this is a Starrett 278 that I have in my collection with a clamp that fits. And I'm not even sure if that's the original clamp. It's a little tight. But anyways, probably is. So I could put that with this other 278. Where is it? Right here. And I got a pair of 278s. Minus one clamp. Next item is an Acme 29 degree Acme screw pitch gauge. There's no brand name on this. It's just kind of a, I think a cheap import. But I don't have an Acme screw pitch gauge, so I'm going to keep that for myself. I don't use it very often, you know. It's really it's more handy for, like, you know, checking the pitch on the lead screws on a lathe or something like that. And then I found another collet block set, which last two of these I sold rather quickly. Sold them inexpensively, and he had this this wrench, which actually looks more like a wrench that would be used almost like an oxyacetylene torch setup or something. Sargent, S-A-R-G-E-N-T is the brand of wrench this is. It's either that or it's a bicycle wrench. It might be a bicycle wrench. I can't remember. I know it seems familiar to me, but the reason why it was in this set is because I guess he found that it was a close enough match radius wise to use to tighten these collar nuts for the collet block set. This is looks like it's just a generic no name collet block set, but I'm sure I'll be able to sell that. They're pretty popular.